Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I thought I'd show you all how I made this purple watercolor flower. I used ink pens, pencil, and watercolor paint. So if you're interested in seeing exactly how I made this, then keep watching. Hey guys, so this is how I made my watercolor. So first I did a general outline with just kind of circles, just to kind of figure out where I want the main flower and some of the buds to go. So again, this is just a super simple outline. I just did circles, lines, just so I knew kind of where I was putting everything so I could kind of see the general placement on the paper. Next, I went back in and started adding details. So I was using reference photo for this, but I just kind of went in and marked out generally where the petals were. This first half circle that I'm marking out is where the petals fold open towards the center part of the flower, and so I'm kind of marking that off first because that's where the petals will change from standing straight up in the center to opening out on the sides. So I'm marking out that half circle first, and then I'm going in and adding in all of the rest of the details for a more detailed sketch. It doesn't have to be a perfect sketch. Again, I'm just using kind of general shapes for the petals, and then I will add more detailed lines when I go in with my pen a bit later. Now I'm going to be opening up my pens. I'm using the 4 pigment liners from Staedtler. And the first pen I'm going to be using is the 0.2 pen, and this is what I'm going to be using for my main outline. And then I'll be using the 0.1 pen for my details later. But the 0.2 pen is what we're going to use right now for the details on the drawing. So here I am going in and doing the outline. As you can see, I'm making my petals a little squigglier with the pen and adding a bit more detail, just because in nature petals aren't total oval shapes. They've got a little bit of folding and bending in them, and so I'm making the lines that I use with my pen a little squigglier and a little more imperfect than my original pencil sketch. So here's what it looks like when I'm done with my pen outline. And so now I'm going to go back in with my 0.1 pen and I'm going to start adding those little details. So right now I'm just adding the shading towards the bottom of the petals. I'm doing kind of different length lines towards the bottom of the petals to kind of show the shadowy part where it's coming from the middle of the flower. The best way to do these lines is to make them all different lengths, and I always do sort of a longer one in the center because sometimes in petals there's kind of a vein in the center. So I try and make my shadow line the longest at the very center of the petal, and then the other ones a bit shorter but still different lengths so that it blends a bit more organically. I'm doing the same thing on the leaves and on the buds of the flower. On the leaves, I'm just doing the kind of vein lines. I'm not really doing any shadowing. And here are all of my details before I add watercolor. So I'm using this number 2 watercolor brush for all of my kind of general color, and then we'll use a different size when we go back in for details. But right now I'm using that number 2 size brush. And I'm mixing some of this pinky purple color, and then I'm also taking a little tiny bit of blue to add to make it a little more purpley. A lot of the petals on this flower are kind of in between a pale lavender color, and then some of them definitely lean more towards a pink color. So I'm going to be mixing different colors a lot throughout this, just so that each petal is kind of a slightly different purple or pink color. So as I go throughout my painting, I'm going to be adding a bit more pink into that mixture, a bit more purple, a little less white, more white, just to make sure that all the petals are kind of different colors. So now I'm going in with those watercolors, and I'm first wetting my first petal. I'm going to go kind of one petal at a time and kind of skip every other petal, just so that any blending I do doesn't leak onto the petal next to it. So I'm going to try and skip around so that the petals that I'm painting are not next to each other until they're totally dry. And then I will go in next to a petal only if it is totally dry. So I'm starting first with this petal, and I'm adding my kind of pink, purple, white mixture. And I'm doing it towards where the lines that I have drawn for detail are the thickest, and letting it kind of fade out towards the tip of the petal, because the inside of the petal will be the darkest and the tips will be a little bit lighter. So I'm kind of making sure I do that ombre. And now I'm going back in because the specific reference photo that I'm looking at has some yellow color towards the very center of the flower where the petals are coming out. And so I'm mixing some yellow with a little bit of my purple mixture to make a kind of muted yellow color that I see in my reference photo, to make that kind of shadowy color that's towards the inside of the flower, because again, in the photo that I'm looking at, the flower has some yellow on the inside of all the petals. So I'm taking that yellow color and I'm just adding it to the base of a lot of my petals, just so that I have that ready, and then I will put the purple on top of it. And again, I'm making that yellow kind of ombre, so it's going to be lightest at the tip of the petal and darkest at the base of the petal. And now I'm ready to go in with the rest of my petals on that purple color, going back to the original color that I was using. And again, I'm wetting my petals first, and then I'm adding in the color that I mixed towards the base of the petal and kind of shading it out, making it fade out towards the tip of the petal. And again, as I'm going, I'm adding a bit more pink. See here, I'm adding a little bit more pink to the petals, especially the petals towards the middle of the flower. They have a lot more pink and darker colors in them. So I'm adding kind of this magenta in towards the middle of the flower, and a little bit on some of the petals, because again, I want all of my petals to be slightly different pinks and purples. So again, as I'm going through this flower, I'm going to be kind of mixing new colors. Here I'm adding a purple that definitely has a bit more blue in it. And then I'm going back to my more magenta color. So again, mixing up that purple, pink, adding more purple, adding more pink, adding more white, just so that we get a lot of different values in the flower. Next, we're going to move on towards the stems and the buds while that dries. We're not going to go in with the details on the flower until it's dry. So we're going to move down to the stems and leaves, and I'm going to mix a dark green color. So the way I'm going to do my stems and leaves is I'm going to use a more lime green color for the general color, and then I'm going to mix a new color that I'm going to use for the shadowy parts. So that is what we're mixing now, is our shadow color for the stems and leaves. So I'm taking this kind of dark green color, and I'm going to take a little bit of orange and mix it in there so that it almost kind of looks black in the pan, but it just ends up being a really, really dark green, which is perfect for shadows. So there's my little bit of orange that I'm adding in. So I'm going in with that lime green color and a lot of water, and I'm going step by step just because I want to make sure that the parts that I'm adding the shadow to are still wet, so it kind of creates an ombre with the lime green. So I'm just going to kind of do bit by bit, make sure the lime green parts are really wet, and then adding in that shadowy color so that they kind of flow together a lot nicer. And now I'm going in with that darker shadowy color on the edges of the stem, and just on that one side. Now I'm going in with the leaf, and first I'm going to wet the whole leaf before I go in and I add that lime green color, and then I'm going to add the darker shadow color. So now I'm going in with the lime green color, keeping it towards the center because in the reference photo I'm looking at, that's where the leaf is the darkest. And now I'm going in with the shadow color for the veins of the leaf, and also towards the base, and the tip has a little bit of shadow in the photo that I'm looking at. And now I'm just going along those veins with that shadow color. And while that dries, I'm going to continue on up the stem, going over other leaves and using the same techniques. So one of the buds is actually purple rather than green, and so I'm just going in with the more purpley color that has a little bit more blue in it to this bud. It's definitely a darker purple color than the rest of the actual main flower. Because it's a bud, it hasn't quite opened up yet. The petals aren't having that light shine through them, so they look a lot darker, and so I'm just going in on that bud with my darker purple color, but again, still trying to vary the purples. So I'm adding a little bit more pink in some points, a little bit more purple in other points, trying to make sure I keep those different values on this little bud here. Next, I'm going to go in and create two colors, which I'm going to use to create more shadow and more dimension and details within the petals of the main flower. So I'm making a more pinky color, and then I'm also making a more bluish purple color. Again, my pink color is still heading towards purple a little bit. There's a little bit of blue in that pink, but it's not quite a purple. It's definitely more of a pink color. So I'm taking those two colors and I'm using my 00 watercolor brush, which is the second to smallest one that I have. And I'm using that to kind of go over the same spots where I did those detail lines with the pen. I'm not going over exactly where the pen was, just kind of generally the same idea. And now I'm just going over on all the petals, making those lines and veins in the petals where the shadowy parts are meeting the tip of the petal. And here I'm going in to mix a little bit darker colors. So as you noticed before, the shadow color I was using is a little bit darker than the original color, but it's not like dark. And so now I'm mixing two darker colors to use for the remainder of the shadows so that we've got some different values going on with the shadows. I'm especially using these darker colors in the middle of the flower where there is more shadow. Next, I'm going to take that dark green color, the same one we mixed earlier. If you're out of it, then just mix it the same way we did earlier. And I'm going over the veins of the leaves and kind of doing the same way that I did with the petals on our buds, with those lines. And this is the final version of the flower. I hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial. I'm very happy with how it turned out. I love the purples, I love the pinks, I love all the different values. I'm super excited about this flower. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all found that interesting or informative. If you're wanting to learn how to paint watercolor flowers, this is how I do it. If you want to check out more of my artwork, you can check out my Instagram, which I'll link below. You can also purchase my artwork on my Etsy, which I'll also link below. And I have a website where you can see more of my artwork. I've got a portfolio on there and then also a blog for more behind the scenes content. And again, you can link that down below as well, and have a nice day.